Every morning, this baby elephant reaches through the bars for the same faded shirt, and when zookeepers tried to take it away, she screamed for 3 hours straight. What could make an animal so desperate to hold on to a piece of human clothing that she'd rather starve than let it go? The morning sun painted the elephant sanctuary in Chiang Mai, Thailand, with streaks of gold and orange light. Tom Richardson wiped sweat from his forehead as he walked through the main gate at 6 a.m., carrying his metal bucket filled with fresh fruit and vegetables. At 34 years old, Tom had worked with orphaned elephants for almost 10 years, but this morning felt different. Something was wrong, and he could feel it in his bones before he even reached the rehabilitation enclosure where the youngest elephants lived. Molly stood pressed against the wooden fence, her small gray body perfectly still, except for her trunk. The 9-month-old Asian elephant calf stretched her trunk through the bars, reaching desperately toward a faded blue work shirt hanging on a hook just inches beyond her grasp. Her dark eyes were locked on that shirt with a focus that made Tom's chest tighten. This was not the first time he had seen this behavior. For 21 days straight, Molly had positioned herself at this exact spot every single morning, reaching for that same piece of clothing like her life depended on it. Tom set down his bucket and watched Molly's trunk wave back and forth, searching for the fabric she could smell but not quite touch. The little elephant made a soft sound, almost like a whimper, that no elephant should ever make. Tom remembered the day Molly arrived at the sanctuary 8 weeks ago. The wildlife rescue team had carried her in on a stretcher, her legs covered in deep rope burns, her body so thin that every rib showed through her wrinkled skin. They had found her chained inside a concrete pit at an illegal logging operation in the mountains near the Myanmar border, where baby elephants were stolen from their mothers and broken through pain and fear until they would obey any command. The veterinary team had worked day and night to save Molly's body. They cleaned her infected wounds, gave her medicine through tubes, and fed her special milk every 2 hours. Her legs healed, her weight slowly improved, and the deep cuts across her back turned into pink scars. But her mind remained trapped somewhere dark and unreachable. While other rescued baby elephants began to play and explore after a few weeks, Molly stood alone in corners, staring at nothing, barely eating, showing no interest in life itself. Then 3 weeks ago, everything changed because of Tom's shirt. He had been fixing the water system in Molly's enclosure on a blazing hot afternoon when the temperature hit 95 degrees. Tom had pulled off his blue work shirt and hung it on the fence post while he tightened pipes and checked valves. When he finished the repairs and reached for his shirt, he noticed Molly standing nearby, her trunk extended toward the fabric, sniffing with an intensity he had never seen in her before. Tom had assumed Molly was just curious, the way elephants naturally investigate new smells in their environment. But when he tried to grab his shirt, Molly made a distress sound and pressed her body against the fence, clearly upset at the thought of the garment being removed. Something in that moment made Tom pause. Instead of taking his shirt home, he left it hanging on that fence post, planning to collect it the next morning. When he returned at dawn, he found Molly in the exact same position, her trunk gently touching the blue fabric, her whole body relaxed in a way he had never witnessed since her arrival. Dr. Ananya Suwan, the sanctuary's head veterinarian, who had studied elephant behavior for 15 years, immediately recognized that Molly's attachment to the shirt meant something important. Elephants possess memories that can last their entire lives, and they form powerful emotional connections to specific people, places, and objects that hold meaning for them. Dr. Suwan set up video cameras around Molly's enclosure to record what happened when no humans were watching. The footage revealed a pattern that made Tom's throat tighten every time he reviewed it. Molly approached the shirt within minutes of waking up each morning and would stand beside it for up to 2 hours, her trunk slowly exploring every fold and wrinkle of the fabric. Throughout each day, she returned to the shirt again and again, especially when loud noises from outside the sanctuary startled her, or when storms rumbled overhead. Most amazingly, Molly's overall health began to improve once the shirt became a permanent part of her world. She started eating larger portions of food. Her fear of the caretakers decreased, and she even showed small moments of interest in the other young elephants, though she would rush back to her shirt whenever those interactions became too overwhelming. The sanctuary staff felt deeply moved by Molly's attachment, but remained completely puzzled by its strength. Tom's shirt looked exactly like the blue work shirts worn by all the male keepers at the facility. Nothing special or unique about it at all. There was no clear reason why this particular piece of clothing should matter so much to a traumatized baby elephant who had experienced nothing but cruelty in her short life. Dr. Suwan developed a theory about scent memory being one of the most powerful forms of memory in elephants, but she needed to understand what specific memory could be so important that it would help an elephant choose to keep living. What connection could possibly exist between this dying baby elephant and a simple blue work shirt? The search for answers about Molly's mysterious attachment required weeks of careful investigation, with Dr. Suwan reaching out to wildlife crime investigators and rescue organizations across Thailand. She contacted the Thai Department of National Parks and requested every piece of information available about the logging camp raid where Molly had been rescued. The reports arrived in thick folders filled with witness statements, photographs of the illegal operation, and interviews with people who had knowledge of how the camp operated. The breakthrough came when investigators located Somchai Pecharat, a 58-year-old man who had worked at the logging camp but left 6 months before the rescue raid happened. Somchai agreed to meet with Dr. Suwan at a small coffee shop in Chiang Mai, and his hand shook as he described what he had witnessed. He explained that he had taken the job because his family needed money desperately, but watching the cruel treatment of elephants had filled him with shame and guilt that he carried every day. According to Somchai's testimony, Molly had not been born at the logging camp, but had been captured from the wild when she was only 4 months old. Poachers had tracked a family group of wild elephants for several days, waiting for the perfect moment to separate a baby from her mother. When they attacked, using loud trucks and heavy ropes to create chaos, they successfully captured Molly, but had to run when her mother fought back with terrifying strength. The most heartbreaking detail was what happened next. Molly's mother, driven by an instinct that humans struggle to understand, followed the poacher's truck for over 30 kilometers through difficult mountain terrain, refusing to abandon her stolen baby. Villagers along the route reported seeing a frantic adult elephant chasing vehicles down dusty roads, her distress calls echoing through the valleys like thunder. But Somchai's story revealed something even more important about Molly's time at the camp. There had been one worker who treated the captive elephants with kindness and respect, a man named Narong Kampa, who served as the elephant handler. Narong came from a traditional elephant-keeping family and understood elephant psychology in ways that the other workers who viewed the animals as tools for profit never could. When Molly arrived at the camp, traumatized and calling desperately for her mother, Narong took it upon himself to provide whatever comfort was possible within the brutal constraints of the illegal operation. Narong would spend his evenings sitting beside Molly's concrete enclosure, speaking softly to her in the traditional elephant keeper's language his grandfather had taught him years ago. He brought her special treats, including medicinal herbs that soothed her stomach and fresh bamboo shoots that reminded her of life in the forest. Most significantly, Narong would drape his blue work shirt over the bars of Molly's enclosure every night, creating a makeshift blanket that carried his scent and provided warmth and security. He believed that having a consistent smell nearby would help calm Molly's fear, and give her something stable in her frightening new reality. Over the 3 months that Molly spent at the logging camp before Narong disappeared, a deep bond formed between the elephant calf and her only source of kindness. Molly would become calm the moment Narong approached her enclosure, would eat only when he sat nearby, and spent her nights pressed against the bars where his shirt hung, her trunk wrapped around the fabric like a child holding a blanket. Then, 2 months before the sanctuary raid, Narong vanished without warning. Somchai's voice dropped to barely a whisper as he explained that Narong had been caught trying to contact wildlife authorities about the illegal operation. The camp bosses discovered his plan to report their location and activities to the police. What happened to Narong after that remained unclear, but the expression on Somchai's weathered face suggested something terrible that he could not or would not describe in detail. After Narong's disappearance, Molly's condition fell apart completely. She refused to eat almost anything, became extremely withdrawn, and developed stress behaviors that would still be visible when she arrived at the sanctuary weeks later. The other workers, lacking Narong's knowledge and compassion, had no idea how to care for her properly. By the time the rescue team broke into the camp, Molly was severely malnourished and psychologically shattered. When Dr. Suwan received this information, the mystery of the blue shirt suddenly became crystal clear. Tom's shirt, identical in color and style to the one Narong had used to comfort Molly, carried scent markers that triggered powerful memories of safety, kindness, and the only love Molly had known since being torn from her mother. Elephants possess the most remarkable sense of smell in the animal kingdom, with the ability to distinguish between thousands of different scent combinations and remember those scents for many decades. Scientists have documented cases of elephants recognizing individuals they had not encountered for over 20 years, purely through smell. For Molly, Tom's shirt was not just fabric, but a connection to her most precious memories, a link to the one human who had shown her kindness when she needed it most desperately. But the wildlife crime investigators were not finished with their search, and what they would discover about Narong's fate would change everything for Molly and everyone at the sanctuary. Could the man who had saved Molly's spirit once before still be alive somewhere, waiting to be found? 6 months after Dr. Suwan first learned about Narong's connection to Molly, wildlife investigators received information that seemed too incredible to believe. Working with informants who had knowledge of the disbanded logging operation, they traced reports of a man matching Narong's description who had been seen in a remote village near the Myanmar border, badly injured, but alive. The investigators immediately contacted Dr. Suwan and Tom, and together, they traveled 3 hours through steep mountain roads to reach the village where Narong had supposedly been hiding. What they found exceeded their wildest hopes. Narong Khampa was indeed alive, though his body showed the terrible damage he had survived. After being discovered attempting to contact authorities about the illegal camp, he had been beaten severely and left for dead deep in the forest. A family of Karen Hill tribe members found him unconscious with critical injuries and nursed him back to health over many long months, using traditional medicine and constant care. Narong's head injuries had been so severe that he could not remember his own name or his previous life for several weeks, and the remote village had no access to hospitals or modern doctors. By the time Narong recovered enough brain function to remember the elephants and the logging camp, the operation had already been raided and shut down by authorities. He had no way of knowing what happened to Molly or any of the other elephants he had tried to protect. When Dr. Suwan explained that Molly was alive and living at the sanctuary, Narong's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Tears poured down his scarred face as he asked question after question about the baby elephant who had captured his heart. He could barely believe she had survived, And when Dr. Suwon told him about Molly's attachment to the blue shirt, Narong broke down completely, explaining that he had promised Molly every single night that he would never abandon her, that his scent would always mean safety. The sanctuary team faced a difficult decision. Should they reunite Narong with Molly? The potential benefits seemed obvious, but so were the risks. Molly had built a fragile stability around her attachment to Tom and the shirt that symbolized Narong's kindness. Introducing the actual person might overwhelm her, or worse, if Molly had somehow forgotten Narong entirely. It could devastate the elephant keeper, who had suffered so much to try to return to her. Dr. Suwon spent days consulting with animal psychologists and elephant experts from universities around the world. The consensus was cautious, but hopeful. Elephants never truly forget significant individuals from their past, and scent memory would almost certainly allow Molly to recognize Narong even after months of painful separation. However, the reunion would need to be managed with extreme care, with Molly given complete control over the pace and nature of the interaction. 3 weeks later, Narong arrived at the sanctuary, having spent the time recovering his strength and preparing emotionally for a reunion that might not happen the way he desperately hoped. The sanctuary team had explained that Molly was no longer the tiny 4-month-old calf he had known, but a larger, more independent elephant who had survived additional trauma after his disappearance. The reunion was carefully planned for early morning, when Molly was typically most calm. Tom had placed his shirt in its usual location, and Molly had completed her normal routine of investigating and standing beside the familiar fabric. Narong was positioned behind a screening fence about 20 meters from Molly's enclosure, where he could see her clearly, but remain invisible to her. For 10 minutes, Narong simply watched Molly, tears flowing freely as he observed how much she had grown and how the trauma had changed her body and spirit. Then came the critical moment. Following the carefully prepared plan, Narong put on a fresh blue workshirt, identical to Tom's, and stood downwind from Molly's enclosure, still hidden from her view. The strategy was to let his scent drift naturally toward her, giving Molly the opportunity to recognize him through the same sense of smell that had made Tom's shirt so meaningful to her survival. What happened next amazed everyone watching, and would later be studied by elephant researchers at 3 different universities. The instant Narong's scent reached Molly's trunk, her entire body transformed. Her head shot up, her ears spread wide, and she released a sound that the sanctuary staff had never heard from her before. A specific call that elephant scientists later identified as a greeting reserved for family members after long separations. Molly rushed toward the edge of her enclosure with speed and purpose, completely unlike her normally cautious movements. Her trunk extended high, searching the air, following the scent trail with unmistakable recognition and joy. Unable to maintain the separation any longer, and with Dr. Suwon's permission, Narong stepped into Molly's view. The elephant calf's reaction left no doubt about her memory. She pushed against the fence, her trunk reaching frantically through the bars, her vocalizations increasing in emotion and urgency. Narong approached slowly, speaking to her in the traditional elephant keeper's language he had used months ago in the logging camp, and when Molly's trunk finally touched his weathered face, both the elephant and the man seemed to understand that something precious and irreplaceable had been restored between them. But would this reunion be enough to complete Molly's healing, or had too much time and trauma passed for their bond to truly survive? 2 years after Molly's reunion with Narong, the Chiang Mai Elephant Sanctuary had transformed into an international center for helping traumatized elephants heal from abuse and loss. Researchers from 6 countries traveled to Thailand to study the revolutionary methods that had emerged from Molly's case. The Blue Shirt Protocol, as it became known worldwide, had been adopted by elephant sanctuaries across Asia and Africa, with remarkable success in helping traumatized elephants begin their recovery journey. The simple idea that consistent scent could provide emotional stability to animals suffering from severe trauma had changed how experts approached elephant rehabilitation everywhere. Dr. Suwan published 3 detailed research papers about Molly's case, focusing on scent memory, emotional attachment, and the healing value of sensory anchors in treating animal trauma. Her work challenged long-held beliefs about elephant psychology and opened new understanding of how elephants process grief, loss, and eventual healing. The research attracted significant funding from conservation organizations, allowing the sanctuary to expand its rescue programs and save additional elephants from logging camps, tourist attractions, and illegal breeding operations throughout Southeast Asia. Molly herself had grown into a confident, socially healthy young elephant who played an unexpected role at the sanctuary. When new traumatized elephants arrived, particularly those separated from their mothers or subjected to brutal training methods, Molly would approach them with gentleness and understanding that seemed to go beyond normal elephant behavior. Staff members watched in amazement as she would guide frightened newcomers to Narong's shirts, stand patiently beside them during their worst moments of fear, and model the trust and security that she had learned through her own painful journey. Narong had become the sanctuary's director of elephant welfare, creating training programs that taught other keepers the critical importance of scent consistency, emotional presence, and patient relationship building when working with traumatized animals. His own story of surviving attempted murder and fighting back to health through sheer determination to reunite with Molly inspired volunteers and staff members who sometimes felt overwhelmed by the scale of elephant suffering they encountered daily in their rescue work. The most significant development came when Tom and Narong joined forces to establish the Blue Shirt Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to rescuing elephants from illegal operations throughout Southeast Asia. The foundation's logo featured the silhouette of a baby elephant with her trunk wrapped around a shirt, and their fundraising materials shared Molly's complete story as living proof that even the most damaged spirits could heal with proper care and unconditional love. Within 18 months, the foundation successfully coordinated raids that rescued 43 elephants from brutal conditions, and each rescued elephant received individualized care based on treatment protocols developed directly from Molly's recovery. Molly's 4th birthday brought worldwide media attention to the sanctuary. News organizations sent camera crews to document her transformation and the broader impact her story had created for elephant conservation. Footage of her reunion with Narong, carefully released with appropriate privacy considerations, had been viewed over 50 million times on social media platforms, raising awareness about elephant intelligence, emotional capacity, and the urgent need for stronger wildlife protection laws in countries where elephants remained vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. But perhaps the most touching aspect of Molly's continuing story was the relationship she maintained with the shirt that had saved her life. Now, a confident adult elephant who no longer needed constant comfort objects to function, Molly still visited Narong's original blue shirt every single day without exception. She would spend a few quiet moments each morning with the faded garment, her trunk gently exploring the worn fabric before moving on to her daily activities with the other elephants in her family group. Researchers interpreted this daily behavior as a form of gratitude ritual, a conscious acknowledgement of the object that had provided hope during her darkest moments. Some scientists compared it to humans visiting meaningful locations or keeping treasured objects from transformative periods in their lives. For Molly, the shirt represented more than simple comfort. It symbolized the exact moment when she chose to keep living, to trust again, and to believe that not all humans meant harm and cruelty. Narong, now in his early 60s, but still strong and dedicated to his life's work, would sometimes sit quietly near Molly's enclosure in the peaceful evening hours, watching her interact with younger elephants who looked to her for guidance and comfort. He had never married, never had children of his own, and he would tell visitors that Molly was his family, his purpose, and his redemption. The months he spent comforting a traumatized baby elephant in a brutal logging camp, risking everything to try to save her and the others, had defined the entire meaning and direction of his life. As Molly matured into adulthood, discussions began about her long-term future and the possibility of carefully managed introduction to wild elephant populations in protected forest areas. This represented the ultimate measure of her successful rehabilitation, the transformation from a dying, traumatized calf into a healthy elephant capable of living naturally. The blue shirt that started everything, Narong's original garment from the logging camp that had been carefully recovered during the facility's closure, was preserved in a special display at the sanctuary's education center, where visitors could see the faded, worn fabric while learning about Molly's journey and the broader crisis facing Asian elephants throughout their rapidly shrinking habitat. On quiet mornings before tourists and researchers arrived, Narong would sometimes enter Molly's enclosure with a fresh blue shirt, and they would repeat the ritual that had saved both their lives years ago. Molly would wrap her trunk around the familiar fabric. Narong would speak to her in the ancient keeper's language, and for those precious few moments, they would both remember the impossible journey that had brought them from a brutal logging camp to a life filled with purpose, healing, and love that transcended the boundary between species.